You are listening to the Carthage Beat podcast. Your leading source for Pan-Africanism to take your senses into the heartbeat of music, culture, and politics. I am your host, Aya Shebi, and I bring you fascinating conversations with some of the boldest African leaders. So let's jump into your dose of Carthage Beat and make Pan-Africanism go viral. Welcome to Carthage Beat. I'm just so excited for this first episode and for the launch of this podcast, but also so scared. I really hope you like the concept. This has been on my hard drive for the last 3 years, and I came into 2021 like, I'm gonna do it. It's time. Why the name? I'm sure you're wondering. Well, first, I am from Carthage, which is today's Tunisia. Many people who follow me throughout my journey might not know where originally I am from. They see me live in Kenya and Ethiopia, travel across the continent, and my identity is strongly African first. But Carthage is where I am from. It's where I grew up, and it's where my heart beats. This show also will have a lot of music-inspired stories. We will go back to the roots to tell Africa's story differently, feeling the connection to our continent as a whole and listening to our own diversity. I hope this will be educational, fun, and genuine, and that it will touch your mind, your hearts, and souls. Now, today is the International Women's Day, and so my guest is very special young female leader.
And I think we can talk about these things on your podcast because of who we both are, free spirits who've gotten to the point where we are, so comfortable in our, in our mortality and in our humanity.
Stay tuned because we're going to talk spirituality, politics, books, sexuality, feminism, self-care. But before and as of every episode, I'm going to introduce you to the music and bites from North Africa. And first couple of episodes, I'm going to talk a lot about my favorite genre, which is Rai. And you're going to learn a lot about it. So let's start with basics and listen to the mother of Rai, Sheikha Ermiti.
ديني يا ليلة أنا وغزالي بجبل اللقط النوار أنا وغزالي يا ليلة أنا وغزالي بجبل اللقط النوار.
I love Rai because it's the music of resistance. It's essential to the identity of Algerians as the blues to blacks in America or the anti-establishment punk. Rai actually means opinion, vision, experience, because Rai singers expressed their opinions and helped communicate about their suffering. They started speaking against the French occupation in the 1930s and against the Islamist movement in the 1990s, to even talking about taboos in Algerian society. Rai singers were called Sheikh for men and Sheikha for women, which is a title of respect. It was first given to the leader of Meddahat, who is a group of women singers. And I'm not biased at all towards my gender, but that's history. Eventually arose the expansion of Meddahat, these women singers, who used bendir, gasba, darbuka, and earthy Amazigh rhythms. It really started from the feminine Meddahat. Then we can't but talk about Sheikha Ermiti, whose radical voice irritated more than one traditionalist. Her song described the tough life of Algerian poor, giving snapshots of everyday struggle of living, the pleasures of sex, love, alcohol, friendship, and the realities of war. She was a rebel. throughout a 60-year career which saw her rise to fame, then and return to international acclaim. She died at 83 in 2006, but really inspired many and some of today's most celebrated rise singers like Sheb Khaled. Sheb Khaled Didi, one of my favorites. I'm going to talk more about Sheikh Harmiti in the next episode because she is a legend. But now it's time for me to welcome my guest, who is a very special one. She's a sister, a best friend, besides being a badass young female leader. Okay, so my guest today is Rose Wachuka. If you visit her Twitter account, you will see in the 109 characters describing herself as public officer, patriot, internationalist, photographer, adventurer, Oxford Chevening alumni, and fighting for human dignity. And today we will unpack all of that. What's up, Rose? How are you doing?
Habibi, how are you? It's great to be on your podcast today.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's just absolutely fantastic to join you and to have this amazing conversation with you.
So I want to start with your first favorite North African song, then we will come back and dig in.
Amazing, amazing. This song has really deep memories for me and deep significance. So let's go for it.
اليوم راني معاك غدوة تاني متمني يكتب المكتوب ونكون حداك يا قلبي شوف هواك وين رماني فوق بحر صافي بمواج وداني معاه تبع رياح الحب وعندك حطني ودعني وصاني وقلي.
So why Zina by Babylon?
So, first of all, because if you listen to the music, and I always say, if you listen to music and you do not understand the language, but it speaks to your soul, it speaks to your heart, then, there's just a bond between you and that song. And for me, it means even more because a dear, dear friend of mine who's now departed from this world played it once in my car, and I'll never forget it. Karim Safi, and then I watched the video and just, the strings of the guitar, the emotion, the message, it's about love, it's about beauty, it's about acceptance, a bit about rejection, it's about the depth of the ocean, just that comparison just has this depth to it. And I don't have to understand all of it. I just have to feel it with my heart and my soul. And it makes me calm and happy and it lifts my mood and I love it.
It's interesting because it's an Algerian song, actually. It's a music band called Babylon. And I know we talk a lot about this. Algeria, Tunisia, a part of Libya was called Ifriqiya during medieval history. And as a Kenyan, as a Pan-African, how do you feel connected to North Africa? How do you feel North Africa is connected to the rest of the continent?
Let me just say that I do not think that places define themselves. I believe that people define places and then give those places character and give those places warmth. But sometimes places define people as well. And that's been my dance with the North of Africa because I have really close ties there. Probably a lot of people don't know our journey, but when we first met, we clicked right away, and you inspired me to start a blog called Green Background. And before that, because I'm really interested in history, of course, I relish and love the intelligence of our people and follow, just amazing inventions and innovations that our people have done, on the African continent. We both have this understanding that the Sahara is just a passageway. It's not a divider. And the story about North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa is not one of division, but really one of reinforcement. Because if you follow history, you'll notice that King Mansa Musa ruled the entire Mali kingdom, which stretched to the north of Africa all the way across to Addis and the Sudan. and was the richest kingdom in the world. We have connected heritage. Sometimes divisionists, want to use the Sahara as a separator. I love Arabic, especially because my country, Kenya, has history with the Arabs. If you look at the positive side of that history, it's a history of cooperation in trade, a history of interweaving our different cultures to come up with a beautiful language called Swahili that infuses a lot of Arabic. Our cuisine has a lot of fusion with North African cuisine. But over the years, sometimes brutal as history may be, I think young people have really redefined what it means to cooperate and to understand and love each other and influence each other in a positive way. So the North African region for me is a place that I've fallen in love with, a place that I have close friends, a place that I could see myself really calling home.
Many people don't know that there is a lot of Arabic in Swahili. Well, what words are Arabic?
We have many. I mean, we have words like shukran. We have words like Arabi, especially if you are hanging around Mombasa. I promise, or you will not be lost if you are from an Arabic-speaking place, because you can understand the language. I mean, binti, habibi, habibti, binamu, rais.
Even I was shocked with Asanti Sana. It's Ahsanti Sonan. No one from Africa would know that that's where it comes from. It's amazing. So I want to give you 2 or 3 dates, Rosie, and I want you to tell me what it means to you. Ready?
Okay. Yep, ready.
17th of April, 2011.
17th of April, 2011.
It's a tough one, I know, but you'd be surprised what that is.
Was this the day that we had the Revolution of Dignity start?
It's true. 2011 was the year, but no.
Yeah.
No, it's not the date.
So this was not the date. It's not the date. 17th of April, 2011. Was this the day that the Americans took out Muammar Gaddafi?
Good guess as well. I mean, a lot happened in 2011. I give you that. It's not related to politics. It's actually related to cinema.
No, I tell me, what happened?
It's the first season of Games of Thrones.
Oh my God! Is this when it premiered?
Yes.
Let me tell you, anyone who knows me knows that I watched Game of Thrones like I was writing a doctoral thesis. I read the books. First of all, I read all the books, and then I'm so fascinated by George R.R. Martin and the production of the Game of Thrones, but I would never have guessed. And 2011 was a heavy year for us, because I remember you being right in the middle of the protests in Tunisia and losing a lot of your friends in those protests, but still, picking up your camera because you wanted to document the process. So anything that has 2011 for me goes back to the Revolution of Dignity. And no, we're not calling it the Arab Spring, because we refuse to give it that tag and that title. So why is this significant, Aya? Why do you want me to talk about the Game of Thrones? And I love it.
Like, you're very, very picky to finish anything or to start anything. So Games of Thrones, for you to have all the seasons and to really analyze it so in depth, I'm fascinated. Why Games of Thrones? What draws you in it? What makes you finish every season?
Power. And at Game of Thrones, it was so layered. It was layered with scientific theory and social theory, and literally it was like writing a doctoral dissertation. And you're right, I'm not a big screen person. The Game of Thrones actually, as a series, has had strong female characters. So for the House Stark, you had Catelyn Stark, you had Arya Stark, you had Sansa Stark. For the House of Targaryens, you had Daenerys, and just saw myself in a lot of those characters as a strong woman. And the women there were all layered and had, different gifts, designing power, designing personality, designing space, taking leadership, putting themselves forward, commanding stations. They are not, waiting for Prince Charming to come and save them, but, determining their own destinies and charting their own paths and really fighting for power. Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, you know that I haven't watched it yet. So after this pitch, you're definitely going to watch Game of Thrones. Okay, so the other date is the night of 29th of November 2020.
Oh my gosh, Aya. Okay, so 2020 is a big year for me, and this is the year that I turned 35. And what do I want to achieve going forward? What do I want to keep consistent? What do I want to change? How do I want to be purposeful? We spent that time just talking about the things that I'm afraid to go after and the things that I should really go after. I wasn't trying to save the world that night. Let me just say, I was just trying to be me. And I hadn't tried to be me in a long time. It was beautiful. And now I'm afraid I'm always myself now. Although I'm still trying to save the world, but it's such a beautiful place to be, to just look at yourself and say, look, I'm proud of you. You've done so much.
But I mean, it's your 35th birthday. And for those who don't know, I mean, you have a long bio of accomplishments. I knew you when you were at the Supreme Court. You moved to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to education, to culture. And besides boards and committees you're on, besides your activism in the Greens before that, I mean, when you look back at 35 years of your life, like, how was that? What were you thinking about?
Sometimes I forget how far I've come. At 23, I was, leading a global green organization. At 19, I was volunteering with an international children's organization. At 25, I was practicing law in one of the top tier law firms in the country. At 27, I was working with the justices of the Supreme Court. At 30, I was so sometimes it's easy to forget how far one has come unless one makes a very deliberate, reflective effort. And that's what happened to me that day. And as a person who's always so self-critical because I want to be better every day and I believe there is room for improvement every day, that's a huge step to actually, pull back and say, look, oh girl, you've been there, you've done stuff, but then let's not sleep on our laurels. Let's not imagine that we've arrived. Let's keep going for it. You want to be president? Please don't hold back. But in a world that's always pushing you to be the best, sometimes just give yourself credit for what you've already done. But I still dream of systems that work. I still dream of efficiency. I still dream of a world that has, great healthcare for all, and a country that has all the children go to school and people have, really human dignity is enhanced. Reflection is an amazing thing. And I do this on my morning walks. I walk religiously in the morning for about an hour. And that's when I really get into my mind.
I know when you mentioned about your morning routine, I remembered your challenge, the walking challenge in November.
Yeah. So in November, I had this challenge where I had to walk a minimum of 5 kilometers every day. For many people who know me, my year starts in November. And it was the way I wanted to start the year. And I remember that 29th of November, I was a bit happy. And I remember you dragging me on the beach to just finish. Where is that armband of yours? How many steps have we done? And we finished that. Again, some of the things that I've learned along the way is if you have people who play for your team and people who deeply understand you and understand where you're going, your tribe is incredibly important because they won't let you waste any opportunity to be better. And they will always push you to be the best person that you could be. And that's what you've been for me, Habibi. And I want to thank you publicly.
Oh, babe. Someone who is also part of our tribe was born on this date, which I want you to also identify with, which is 15 of October, 1987. And every 15 of October, we celebrate him. And you do not go any 15 of October without making a tribute.
Okay, Tomas Sankara.
Yes.
Tomas Sankara was born on the 15th of October. And for us, he's the husband we never married. He's the president we never had. He's the brother we never met. He's the father we never experienced. And especially because his philosophy was so empowering for everyone, but more so for African women and the women of Burkina Faso, the land of upright men. And indeed, he was an upright man. And his philosophy on female empowerment and leadership just reverberates at a period when the kind of female empowerment we're pushing for today was unheard of, was non-existent. And he pushed women in Burkina Faso and challenged men everywhere to provide equal opportunities for women everywhere. And that's why we resonate with him so much. It's really a shame that kind of leadership was not given an opportunity to hang around a lot longer on the continent in the flesh. But I can tell you that making him a martyr just ingrained his philosophy in the minds and hearts of young Africans now, because we can access that philosophy and we can channel his energy from the afterlife to give us the courage we need to demand better leadership for our countries today. Yeah, and we hold these people, in great esteem. And I can tell you that not very many continents can say that they enjoyed the unwavering commitment and dedication to human rights, to human dignity, and to the overall well-being of countries as we've had on the African continent. We've lost young, iconic leaders in this continent, which reminds us that every day is important. And if you will not support Bobi Wine with what he's doing in Uganda, then really it's a great disrespect to all the people we have lost on the continent, people who really have the dignity of our people at heart. And that's why I always call upon young people to look back at history and to understand where we've come from. And we do not have to win elections, but we absolutely have to stand for what is right. For the woman in an urban area and for the woman in the village, trying to feed their families and trying to make it work. For the man who works in the industries and for the man who works in the mines, without discrimination. And those are the things that we have to push for. But we also have to channel the energy of those who've gone before us and really say, they met their prerogatives before their time. Are we going to do that for them? Why I decided to join the public service is because as an activist, I was like, but how do I get to influence change from the front? Despite the misgivings that I might have had, I said, I want to join government. I want to get into the belly of the beast because I want that criticism to push me to do something. And it's a great sacrifice, and we all have different ways of dealing with things, but we shouldn't let activism die. We shouldn't let our radical natures die, and we shouldn't shy away from politics of public service just because we don't like what it looks like now. History has all those phases of leadership and politics, and we can redefine what it looks like in our time.
Well, I want to pick up on that. We don't like what it looks like now, and I want to really know what you think about Kenya's politics now, because President Uhuru just made a statement that, it's time now for a leader from a different community to take over other than Kikuyu and Kalanja. So what did you think about that statement in 2020, moving to Kenya's election 2021?
I think it's a bold statement from the president. It's an act of courage to say that because, Kenyan politics is a politics of numbers. And those two communities have massive numbers. And for the president to declare that it's time for the presidency to pass on to a different tribe, it's an act of courage. But if we are being truly honest about our struggles as a country, we know that it will take a lot more than a leader coming from a different tribe to really fix, the nature of our politics. But I do respect and honor the president for taking the first step to challenge Kenyans that it's time to pass on the baton. And let's not, keep this leadership or this presidency locked in the tribes that have the largest majority in the country. We can actually go for competence. We can actually go for selflessness. We can actually go for other values and not just numbers. And if we're interrogating that statement, then we ought to be asking ourselves, why is it that presidents have come from these two tribes? And we know the reasons why. And then we have to ask ourselves, how do we make sure that everybody plays at a level playing field when it comes to the presidency? And that's the major question. What do we do with our political system so that everybody, male, female, Kikuyu, Kalenjin, Luya, Luo, Taita, Pokot, are all playing at a level playing field? And I guess that's a question that every Kenyan is willing to look into. If we are following that a similar act of courage, we can also, follow a similar act of courage to say that all the presidents have been male. And maybe it's about time that we had a president who's female. Let's take that cue of courage to really deconstruct everything that we know is holding us captive from total liberation.
So okay. I want to dig a bit deeper into Kenya's politics, and this is not a statement, but I think a lack of statement of Kenya's position of Israel and Palestine. Kenya rarely make a position, and on the one hand, Kenya joins, Israelis for war against terrorism, buys weapons from Israel, and on the other hand, you have a representative in Nairobi from Palestine, and you also called out Israel at some point for respecting the right of self-determination. So, we don't really understand what is Kenya's position on this issue.
Now I'm going to put on my diplomat's hat. And I will say that Kenya has several founding diplomatic positions. And one of those is the right to self-determination. So the right to self-determination is part of Kenya's foreign policy character. And it is part of Kenya's foreign policy character because we had to fight really hard for our independence. I mean, Kenya and Algeria on the African continent probably had the bloodiest wars for independence. And so at the birth of our nation, we were very aware that we would protect another country's right to self-determination in the same way that we wanted the world to recognize that we really also wanted to have autonomy. So that's one part. The second part is that international politics is always a moving piece. It's for self-interest. And self-interest is, in the future, if we're invaded by a particular country, we want the world to know that our character as a nation is for self-determination. And so that is Kenya's approach to the Israel-Palestine question, would be to respect self-identity. And then, of course, there are particular relations that Kenya has built with different states, different countries around the world. And really, for me, I think that Kenya hasn't come out to say we are in support of Palestine or we're in support of Israel, because I don't think diplomacy ought to be a separating issue, because I think that depending on what is happening in the world, is this an issue that we ought to take a different angle because of the facts presenting themselves on the ground? And I think that this has been Kenya's approach, not just with the Palestine-Israeli question, but its own question with Uganda with respect to the Migingo Island. With our neighboring countries, some of the areas that we are in discussions over.
And it fascinates me, though, that the people of Kenya are very clear about their position with Palestine. I remember when I first had the kufiya and you told me it's called Arafat, and people know exactly what that means, and they know it's a symbol of liberation, and it really fascinated me.
Also, I mean, if I push history a little, and if I give you just a bit of information that probably is not too common out there, is that Kenya and Palestine have a very unique history, because Kenya's territory would very much have been what Palestine is today. Towards the end of the war, there were discussions about resettlements, and Kenya was on the table as an option. And so Kenyans know that based on our history, it's actually, historical injustices really go to the core of who we are. And it affects everyone. It has affected our country. Even, the sort of politics we have today, politics based on tribe. Because before colonialism, we didn't have this very defined boundaries between tribes. And that was a divide and conquer tactic, which continues to plague us to date. when you know that the wars that trouble you inside, you want to offer that that hope and that lesson to people who are almost experiencing the same problem as you. And there is brotherhood and camaraderie. And so it's just about, what is your identity? And do you consider that identity ideal in another circumstance? And that's how friendships are forged in international politics.
You know, bringing that really reminds me of what's happening in the United States currently. You know, how do you analyze the current situation right there, but also the future of Africa-US with the Biden administration?
First of all, I think there's a lot that Africa can teach the US and vice versa. I do think that, what happened at the Capitol building in the US is absolutely regrettable. It has opened up an avenue for a lot of entities to criticize democracy as a way of governance. But that's not a bad thing, actually, because we have to constantly keep, these conversations alive. Are we doing the best to keep improving our political systems? Are we ignoring some of the root causes? Because I think in the American case, it's actually a buildup of years of ignoring some of the things that actually ought to have been brought to the fore in American politics. How do you treat Black citizens protesting on the streets? And how do you treat white citizens protesting on the streets? And what that does is that it creates this us versus them kind of narrative, which is very dangerous. I also want to honor those who are standing against that display of racism, that display of exclusion, that display of, state selective intervention. We've had the Black Lives Matter movement, replicated across the African continent. And it's a progressive show that, people are willing to stand for what is right. Because the difference is, ignoring what's happening versus really, speaking out. Political voices are as important as the vote itself. And so when you utilize your political voice, you then become a citizen who actually cares for your country, cares for its future, and cares for posterity.
I think we got a little bit of what's happening in your mind, your analysis. We dig deep into the politics, but there is a lot more to discuss, and maybe we can listen to your second favorite song from North Africa, Sidi Mansour, and then we'll be right back.
Perfect.
I mean, Sidi Mansour is a Tunisian song, so this is Tunisian folklore. But this particular record is by an Egyptian guitarist, Omar Khorshid.
Yes.
So a Tunisian song by an Egyptian. We talk a lot about Tunisia or Ifriqiya and its capital Carthage, and it's all a melting pot of history. So why Sidi Mansour? Why this version as well?
First of all, this song has really commanded a lot of international imagination. The folklore version was translated, by many other artists who've done renditions of it across many countries, not just, in North Africa, but also beyond. And when you listen to it, it has, again, as I said about Zina, it has a melancholic ring to it. And that melancholy is almost, a dalliance between the now and the afterlife, what we have and what we don't have. But it's also very deep in its lyrics, that makes you feel a particular way. For me, it's my writing song because for me, writing is an act of melancholy. And if I want to tone the melancholy down a little bit, then I have a playlist, and this song is in that playlist, because then it sort of like just transports my mind to possibilities and transports my mind to the depth and importance of life and honoring our ancestors, people who've gone before us. It just grounds me in that understanding and your realization that, our time here is limited, and we absolutely must look beyond this life.
Yes.
So you better believe that this song is going to be playing a lot as I write.
That's amazing. It's interesting, I think, that you mentioned, death and life after death. And Sidi Mansour is, we believe in Tunisia, is a saint, and his Sufi shrine is on the coast of Tunisia in Monastir. And Sufism is some spiritual path as well of Islam. So I'm curious to know your spiritual path, and also if you believe of life after death.
Wow. For me, spirituality is a big chapter in my life, because for the past 3 years now, I have engaged deeply into my spiritual side. And I started doing that in 2018 after I lost my father. And for me now, death was more, it was losing a part of myself. To really, think about the afterlife, and to think about what happens to human beings when they exit this world. And as a Christian, I know the teachings of the Bible and the promises of the afterlife, but I wanted to take a more critical aspect to it. I do believe that the human spirit doesn't die. I'm not convinced that it dies, because since 2018, I've experienced, many things that still, tell me that Dad's spirit is very much here. I don't know if you feel this, but sometimes I feel like my soul is very old, like old. Like I've lived many years because, just of some of the feelings that I have, some of the intuitions that I have. Sometimes the things that I know that I'm not supposed to know. And I'm also a lover of nature, as you know. I think plants have their own spirit. And so, just that holistic understanding of what could happen if I allowed, myself to manifest. And I always say that I am connected to the source of all that is. And what that means is that source is the source of everything that is. And whatever it is, I'm connected to it. I do think that there's something more to the human soul and to the human being than we know. And so, which better canvas to use than that of myself? And so self-discovery powered by vulnerability. And vulnerability starts where shame ends. So I want to kill every form of shame in my life. And I want to encourage other people to do the same.
Yeah, I know your passion, which is exhibiting year after year, has become health. Even though you're also an education advocate, you're environmentalist, you speak about climate change. Yeah, like your niche, as we say in the digital space, is becoming really the healthcare system. Where did that come from, and why?
Growing up, I felt exposed to two things, and one is disease, and the other is injustice. And the overarching theme of my purpose is human dignity. And after many years of thinking about it and internalizing it, I know that we cannot have or attain human dignity devoid of justice, and justice in all its forms. And a huge part of that dignity is really personal dignity and how we treat the sick in our society, the dying and the dead. As an educated young Kenyan who's doing relatively well financially compared to many people, I'm still scared about, getting sick and having to go to hospital. And I write on my blog, I wrote in 2013 that I was voting for health. And so the candidate that was going to give me the better policies on health is the candidate I was going to vote for president. I really want to just inspire or try and build better healthcare systems, because we have a lot of people who are living in pain. They can't afford the cost of healthcare, or we simply don't have the services to take away that pain. And so death becomes the alternative. And it's sad, because we must always choose life.
Yeah. I mean, you also kind of already inspire people, because you've been writing a lot this year, I think increasingly than other years on your social media. And I want to pick one statement you made on September 2nd last year. It's a quote from Michelle Obama. And you wrote her quote, "Let me tell you, he is the whole of my heart. His loss is my scar. but let me tell you something, his memory drives me forward every single day of my life. And then you add in the memory of my father, 2 years today. I know we touched a little bit, you mentioned your father, but how was his departure?
Wow. It was quite unexpected because he suffered a massive cardiac arrest. So it was just one of those things, you're speaking one moment and the next moment he's not there. And as many fathers in our society, he was really, the anchor pillar of our family, and not just our nuclear family, but our extended family. And that's, when I came face to face with the extent of my strength, but also the depth of my feelings, because my strength, because I was able to withstand that loss, and I woke up every day and I'm like, how can I even be able to wake up? Like, if the world doesn't understand what kind of relationship I had with this man. And although sometimes people prepare barriers in the way that they would themselves want to feel good about what they've done, I was very conscious and conscientious about, everything that he would have appreciated. So he would have appreciated to really become again one with the earth, because he was a farmer. He truly valued soil, and he valued nature. And I knew that it was a no-brainer that I didn't have to cement his grave, and just appreciating his life and his impact on all of us, but also his teachings. The interesting thing, Aya, is that every time I remembered something that he and I did together, the pain diminished substantially. And really, it changes you. I think as many people say, motherhood, fatherhood changed them. For me, it was the passing of my dad. It changed my entire perspective on life. It made me want to live life a little and make a lot more memories than I was making.
It's so inspiring to hear you talk about him with so much joy, after 2 years of grief and pain and going through your own process. And I think this year or last year has been also a reminder of gratitude for our parents, because the pandemic, the most vulnerable to the pandemic is our elders, and I think that's also was eye-opening to me, and especially people like us who are traveling all the time and who live by themselves independently, and we try to find the time to make for our families. I think it's an inspiration to many of us who still have our parents alive, to pass that time with them and be grateful for it, and also accept when they pass away, to live with their joy and memories, as you said. So I think you speak of him powerfully. I hope one day we will read that also book where you express the full story. And I know you quote Michelle Obama often. Becoming is on your shelf. And the best gift to you from anyone to be is books, because once you see them, like your adrenaline is on, and you're like, I want to read all of this. So I have two questions. One is, how many books? And then tell us a bit about Becoming for those of us who haven't read it yet.
I started reading very, very early in life. I sort of felt transported to a different world every time I read. And I've always loved writing. And so this reading, for me, powers my writing. So they are Siamese twins. And I don't know how many books I have, Aya, but I have a lot. It's incredible. So any time I'm interested in something, I want to just dig deep into it. And those who know me know that I'm reading 5 or 6 books at a time, and I don't read a book from cover to cover like in prose. I am a very skimmy reader, but I have a very high capacity to absorb information, and then to just delve into parts that I find very interesting. And I guess that's one of the tricks. Now I'm older, I read various aspects of works, this broad array of opinion on different things, on the same thing by different people, and then I can infuse my own thinking. based on what others have said. I can disagree, I can agree, I can add to it, I can decide to do further research. It's a dance. It's a beautiful dance. Michelle Obama is phenomenal. Let me just say that I think she has redefined what becoming is to a lot of us. And to read her book and to see how precisely she brings out her story is absolutely inspiring. And make no mistake, I love Barack, but their books don't compare. I'm sorry to say. I was almost angry, and I told you, Aya, at how casually Barack writes about her and how deeply she writes about him. And I was like, what? No. You see, I saw a lot of myself when I read that book. Graduate college, work in a top tier law firm, want to get a master's from the best university, do this, do that, get married, do this, do that. In my case, when I read her book, her life got disrupted along the way, and she just started leaving and not so much box checking, even if she's extremely structured. And that was, raw experiences. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, by the way. She was just telling her story in the rawest form possible. If you don't buy any other book and you just want inspiration, in the form of another human story, then Becoming is a book to grab. I would also recommend Shonda Rhimes' The Year of Yes, which is also very powerful and very powerfully told.
I can't wait to read your autobiography. I wanted us to conclude with some looking forward to 2021. And I read that you wrote on 31st of December that 2020 was not a loss. It was a mirror into our very souls. It made us dig into the deepest parts of ourselves, surfaced our conscious, and brought forth our human superpowers. So what were those superpowers, Rosie, and what are you taking from 2020 to 2021?
I think 2020 was a heavy year for all of us. I know that it was very difficult for a lot of families, very difficult for a lot of countries, very, very difficult for a lot of people. I lost very close people to COVID. And I referenced gladiator. And in 2020, I thought of myself a lot as a gladiator, because I thought of myself in a battle that could end either way, with a virus, with a rapidly changing healthcare situation in the world. And as I've told you, with this anxiety about what my own healthcare system could handle and couldn't. And when you see the people who are supposed to hold the expertise in epidemiology themselves saying, look, this is a new thing. We're still trying to learn it. We're still trying to understand it. And we will deal with it as we go. Then you know that it's quite uncertain. And I said, 2020 happened to really anchor us as a mirror into our deeper souls. Are we ready for a life of adversity? Are we ready to share? Are we ready to fight together? Are we ready to unite? Are we ready to forget all the things that divide us as opposed to bring us together? Everybody who made it out of 2020 is a better person than they were when they entered it, loss or not.
That's a great summary of the year, and it's a very positive one as well. So going into 2021, do you have any relationship goals?
Yes, I do.
2021 relationship goals, madam.
I have to say, Aya, that I'm not under pressure. I am not in a rush. I am, very calm about it, but I'm also intentional and ready. I feel like now I would be a better partner than other years. And I'm very open about that, because then previously I was still, trying to really understand who I am. And I think now I have come into full realization of that. And I know that Esther Perel, who is an amazing relationship coach and who I encourage everyone to follow and listen to, has debunked the myth of Like I want to learn myself, and I want to understand myself so that I can understand another person. And I agree with her, because that doesn't end ourselves. So when you say that, you're trying to be in tune with yourself, don't shut out relationships with your friends, with your loved ones, or even romantic ones, because while in those, then you're also able to really understand what you are. And that's when you understand your triggers. That's when you understand what you appreciate. That's when you understand what your purpose is. That's when you understand, your boundaries. I think vulnerability starts where shame ends. And we have to stop shaming our girls for not conforming to the standards of society at a time when they ought to have. And I do know that when we shame our girls into wanting to be accepted by society, then we curtail their power and capacity to grow and to become everything they could in their own time. And I do think that time is a very personal asset, and everybody ought to determine what they do with that resource that is God-given, and that we all have. I want a relationship that's very empowering and that will continue to allow me to remain as human as possible. I mean, I don't want a Cinderella slipper. I don't want that. I want a real partnership.
Do you want to talk a little bit about sex and pleasure?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, yeah. Sex and pleasure are, two things that are really not spoken about enough, and the power to really harness those, and the great connection between the mind and the body and sex is absolutely, incredible. And it's great to just, keep pushing sexual liberation, because it's part of who you are deeply. This is a topic that we should, pick up on its own. I'd love to talk about tantra, self-acceptance. I'd love to talk about body image, intellectual stimulation. I'd love to talk about erotic intelligence, all these things.
Oh my! Now I'm even more curious. Erotic intelligence.
Yeah. What sex and pleasure is.
It's true. I mean, you're right. We don't talk much about sexual liberation, especially in our spaces. And it's interesting that I think it comes, I come from a conservative family who, this is not a topic to talk even in one-on-one with my mom, let alone a conversation with, cousins. But I feel that there is a lot of learning and mentoring in, that journey of sexual liberation that we could do, our generation as millennials, to our younger sisters and the girls in our communities to be open about it and to ask questions and to be curious about their sexual journey as well. And it's also part of empowering oneself. The soul, the mind, the body, it's all connected. And you talked about energy. We have a lot of energy, sexual energy right there in our, very particular, body parts. And I think oppressing that is also part of, our depression and all the things we go through. 2020, perhaps one of the toughest things, some people who've been alone on lockdown by themselves for a long while has been that as well, and not being able to be in touch with other because they're not maybe in touch with their own bodies. So thank you, Rosie, for being with us, for sharing, even a little part of yourself and your intellect and your emotions with us today. I will leave the final word to you, what you want to say to our listeners.
Well, I think that everyone who's listening to this podcast is incredibly powerful. Powerful to empower themselves and powerful to empower others, but also powerful to distract and powerful to destroy others as well. And I think, my prayer today is that we may all find the power that builds within ourselves and that builds society, and that channels all the negative energy we get into bowls of positive energy. But may we also accept that we are not enough by ourselves. I mean, we are enough, but that we could be a lot more powerful if we allow ourselves to work with others, allow ourselves to ask for help. A dear friend of mine told me that needing others is not a weakness, that it's a strength. And I also want to encourage, those who've lost hope, and those who think that life is cruel, and those who've gone through a lot of heartbreaking things, and to say that it's always darkest before dawn, and that if we allow ourselves to just leave this moment, that the next moment might be better, and if it's not, then the next one will be better.
Do whatever you want. I think that has been also our common motto. And be
Absolutely.
whoever you want to be. I think especially as young women and young females listening will understand what that means, because of what, as a young woman, we go through every day. And I think it's empowering to listen to someone who's been through a challenging, difficult, joyful, intellectual path, spiritual, all of what we listened from you today. A lot of moments give me goosebumps. And it's people like you who, when I listen to, give me that drive again and that energy that there is still to learn, there is still to do, there is still to give to your own family and community, to the world, while taking care of yourself. So I think this has been really empowering and inspiring, and I learned a lot, even though I know you for years. Thank you for your wisdom. I love you.
I love you too, Habibi.
I am absolutely inspired, and I hope you are. Don't forget to rate, review the podcast, and be the first to receive future episodes by subscribing to the newsletter at carthagebeat.com. Reach out on all social media, Carthage Beat, or my social media, Ayashebi, and let me know who my next guest should be. Until then, salam.
بابا حنانية بابا بوسانية